I still remember the first time I set foot on a cruise ship's bridge. The thrill in my chest, the sense that I was standing on the cusp of an endless horizon. I was a young officer then, barely older than my son Daniel is now, and the ocean seemed like freedom. That was 25 years ago. 25 years of calm waters, savage storms, near collisions, power struggles with corporate management, and everything in between. I've seen passenger brawls, love stories that began on deck 7 and ended a week after, and more midnight buffets than I care to count. Through it all, I kept telling myself that it's a good life. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of the reasons I fell in love with it. Maybe it was the disturbing corporate meddling, or maybe it was a piece of my heart that sank when my wife passed away. Hard to say. Either way, I find myself here on the Celestial Voyager, a vessel that was once the pride of the line, feeling that same old dread. Just one more trip, I thought. One more contract and you're done. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. We're 4 days into a 7-night cruise from San Diego to the tropics, 2,000 passengers aboard, plus another 500 crew. I still haven't set foot in the main dining room, but my presence there is largely ceremonial. Passengers want to see the young entertainment staff, not a tired captain with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that seem etched deeper by the hour. That's fine by me. My only comfort on these soulless trips, truth be told, is Dr. Bill Adams, the ship's medic and my closest friend for over a decade. We met on an Antarctic expedition when he treated me for mild frostbite. We bonded over a shared contempt for the corporate corners we saw getting cut, day after day. Yet we stuck around. Him for the research and me for the paycheck. These days, I keep my focus on the job, navigating the vessel, ensuring the schedules are met, and smoothing out any potential friction with management. That's all I am. A glorified bus driver on the water. At least that's how the corporate brass sees me. You don't own this ship, they remind me often. You just drive it. I convinced myself that I had no other choice but to continue. If I walked away, how would I pay for Daniel's college? How would I keep my house afloat while still dealing with the leftover medical bills from my wife's final days? Anyways, the first 3 days of this voyage, hopefully my last, passed in monotonous normalcy. Checking charts, talking with the officers, scanning the horizon, and making sure we're on schedule. We're just off an old industrial shipping path, one that was supposedly decommissioned years ago when the region's waters were declared unsanitary for commercial fishing. Corporate orders us to go this way, to save money on fuel. It's an open secret that the line never invests in the best or the safest. Cheapest is best. That's their motto, whether they admit it or not. Then on the 4th night, things take a much darker turn. I'm on the bridge, perched in the captain's chair, half listening to the chatter of my night officer Celeste as she goes through routine checks. Navigation, weather, and radar, everything is green. But I can't get comfortable. My back aches from a combination of age and tension. Then the radio crackles. The sound itself is weird, staticky, almost as if the speaker is underwater. Celeste frowns, tries to tune it, but the words come in broken. Mayday, drifting, no power coordinates. I straighten in my chair. Celeste, can you get a fix on that? She responds, trying, Captain. The signal's weak, definitely not from a standard passenger vessel. After a few moments, we pinpoint the approximate location. The signal came from a cargo freighter, not more than 5 nautical miles from our position. By all official protocol, we should pass it along to the Coast Guard or local maritime authority. After all, we're a cruise ship, not a rescue vessel, and corporate policy is explicit. Report and move on, unless it's life or death. But something in that signal sets my teeth on edge. A voice barely audible, repeating something garbled. I can't even catch half the words. Something about not the water, or maybe it was don't water. Hard to be sure. Before I can even think it through, the corporate handbook leaps unbidden to mind. If it's a potential hazard to the ship's path, we can investigate. Otherwise, forward the coordinates. And yet, I hear a memory of my younger self, the idealistic officer, the man who'd jump at the chance to help. I press the intercom button. Celeste, inform the crew we'll be slowing to approach. I want a scout team ready to investigate. Keep it small, just enough to check for survivors. She nods, flipping switches to reduce speed. The celestial Voyager rumbles as the engines throttle down. Half an hour later, we're near enough to see the freighter with our searchlights. An ancient cargo ship, rust streaks along its hull. There are no lights on deck, and the name is faded, but we identify it as the Sapphire Voyage. My security officer, Kayla Brandt, stands ready with a small team on the starboard boarding platform. They've got life jackets, harnesses, and medical supplies, standard for an emergency check. Dr. Adams is there too, wanting to treat any survivors on the spot if needed. I meet him as he's loading his kit into the rescue boat. Adams is older than me by a couple of years, face weathered by decades at sea, but still with the energy of a younger man. Under the deck lights, I see the concern etched in his dark eyes. "This is a gamble," he mutters, pulling on gloves. "But maybe we can save someone." I clap a hand on his shoulder. "You're the only doc I'd trust to do it, but if it looks bad, pull out immediately." He offers a quick nod, and then they're lowering the rescue boat into the water. When they reach the freighter, they disappear into a patch of darkness. For a while, there's silence. Then Kayla's voice crackles through my radio. "Captain, we've found a survivor. Male, mid-30s, disoriented, severely dehydrated. Rest of the ship appears deserted." My heart pounds. "Any sign of foul play?" "Hard to say, sir. It's a mess. Equipment smashed, water containers all empty. We'll bring him aboard our rescue craft. We're returning now." 40 minutes later, they return. I head to the medical bay. It's a small facility, like a clinic with a few exam rooms and a main triage area. When I arrive, Adams is leaning over a narrow bed where the survivor lies. The man is drenched in sweat, shivering violently. The overhead lights reveal a disturbing pallor to his skin. It was ashy, almost gray at the edges. Kayla stands at the side, arms folded. He hasn't said a word since we picked him up. Just mumbled something about water and get it out. I glance at Adams, who's taking the man's temperature. "How are his vital signs?" I ask. "They are strangely erratic," the doctor replies, pressing a stethoscope to the man's chest. "Subnormal temperature, dehydration at near-critical levels. He might be in shock, probably drifting for days. I'll get some fluids into him and run labs, but I can't do much else until I figure out what's going on." Then suddenly, the man's eyes flutter open, rolling around without focusing. His lips part. I lean in, close enough to catch a faint whisper, "Don't drink it." Then he arches his back in a spasm, forcing Adams to hold him down. "He's delirious," he mutters to me. "Captain, you might want to get some rest. I'll keep you updated." I linger a moment, unsettled. A question hovers at the back of my mind. What happened on that freighter? But with no further clues, I leave Adams to his work. Climbing back to my cabin, I replay the man's desperate warning. "Don't drink it." What could that possibly mean? Despite my fatigue, sleep feels like psychological torture. Nightmares. Half-formed images of my son Daniel's scowl, the black hull of a cargo ship, water swirling in an endless whirlpool. When I finally drag myself out of bed, it's nearly sunrise. I check my phone for any messages from Adams, but there was nothing. So I slip into my uniform and head for the medical bay. On my way, I notice that Deck 6 smells faintly of disinfectant, probably because of some cleaning in the small pool area. But something feels wrong. In the medical bay, I find Kayla scowling at an empty bed. "What the hell?" I ask. She shakes her head in annoyance. "He is gone. Adams checked on him around 4 in the morning, said the man was stable. He stepped out for a moment to get some medication. Next thing I know, the bed is empty and the door is open. Did Dr. Adams say anything about the man's condition? I ask. Not much. I guess his vitals were still all over the place, but there was improvement. I've had the security team searching the decks for an hour now. No sign of him. She points to the IV line lying on the bed, as if yanked out. He left that behind. I feel a chill. For a severely dehydrated man, borderline delirious, to just wander off. Something doesn't add up. He couldn't have gone far, I say, forcing a calm I don't feel. Keep searching. Check every corridor, every closet if you have to. Kayla nods and hustles out. Adams emerges from another room looking concerned. Ethan, this doesn't make sense, he mutters, using my first name. The man could barely stand, yet somehow he's vanished. I press him for more details. He tells me the survivor had an elevated white blood cell count, possible infection. But I couldn't identify the type, he adds, rubbing his temples. It's unusual. Then he started mumbling about water again. You think he's a risk? Could he harm passengers? My mind jumps to a worst-case scenario, a violent mania from delirium. I don't think so. He was too weak to even walk, Adams repeats, then lowers his voice. He kept talking about something in the cargo hold of the freighter, like it got into their supply. He said if you drink it, you change, but he never explained more than that. A prickle of unease runs down my spine. Then 2 hours later it happens. A shrill alarm cuts through the hum of the engines and the chatter of the crew. An automated voice booms. Emergency alert. Biological contamination detected. This vessel is now under full lockdown. Evacuation is strictly prohibited. My heart plunges. We've never had a real outbreak scenario at sea, not on my watch. My officers stare at me, eyes wide. Celeste stands next to the console, her hand hovering over the radio switch. Captain, I didn't trigger that. It came from the main security system. Shut it off, I tell Celeste, my voice clipped. She tries, but the system rejects our override. Unauthorized action. Please contact corporate headquarters. My jaw clenches. Corporate installed an AI-driven security system last year, promising advanced threat detection. But it's obviously malfunctioning, or so I assume. I jam the ship-wide intercom button. Attention passengers, this is Captain Graves. Please remain calm. We're experiencing a technical issue with our security system. I repeat, please remain calm. As my voice echoes through the corridors, I see confusion on passengers' faces in the security feeds. Then, as if on cue, a second system alert pings. Water supply contamination suspected. Do not consume tap water, ice, or beverages prepared on board. This includes fountain sodas, teas, coffees. Further instructions to follow. Behind me, Celeste gasps softly. Captain, it's referencing contamination. Is it possible the survivor brought something aboard? My mind races. Don't drink the water. That warning from the survivor replays in my head like a broken record. We need answers, I say. I will handle the passengers. Kayla, find out how the system triggered. Check engineering, check the water lines, check everything. She nods, leaving with a determined look. I contact Dr. Adams. His voice is shaky. Ethan, the lockdown triggered alarms here too. I'm stuck in the lab, can't leave. There's a message on my terminal referencing a high-level infection risk. It's saying the contamination is in the ship's water supply. A chill seeps into my bones. Adams, we've been pumping that water through the entire vessel for days. We have purifiers and filters, but if the raw source was compromised, he exhales loudly. What if that's how it started on the freighter? My hands ball into fists. Doc, do what you can. Run tests. Figure out if we already have infected passengers. He hesitates. I'll need to see them, but I can't leave the medical bay. Systems locked me in. Everyone else is locked out. Then we will bring the patients to you instead, I reply before ending the call. Over the next hour, the calls multiply. Passengers complaining they can't leave their cabins, that the doors are sealed. Some talk about friends or family acting strangely, whispering nonsense, or trying to drink water from the faucets despite the alerts. Then, one by one, the lights on the security monitors go red in certain sections. The ship's AI system designates them as quarantine zones. We see silhouettes of people moving in the corridors, some staggering or crawling. A creeping dread sets in. The ship is not on our side. The system is following some pre-programmed directive from corporate. This is a test environment now, my instincts scream. I hesitate, struck by the apparent contradiction. If this was a deliberate experiment, why would the system alert people to stop drinking? But then it dawns on me. In reality, it's also part of the data collection, to see how people respond when told not to drink, to see who obeys and who doesn't. With half the decks locked, I can only reach the areas the system has not quarantined. My next move is a direct confrontation with the main computer. If I can't override it, maybe I can glean some logic behind these decisions. I hurry to the ship's central control room, a restricted area behind the bridge that houses the AI servers. On my way there, I pass a row of windows looking down at the promenade deck. Passengers are banging on locked doors, tears streaking their faces. A few seem ill, crouched on the floor, shivering. In the control room, I'm met by a digital interface that hums with cold efficiency. The large screen is plastered with lines of code and repeated warnings about biohazard alert, condition red. With a sinking heart, I attempt an override, typing in my passcodes. Each time I'm denied. A sub-window catches my eye, an algorithm log tracking passenger movement, water usage, and infection probability. I click it open and see columns with passenger IDs, deck assignments, and infection likelihood percentages. Some have red bars next to them. Others remain green. The pattern is bizarrely clear. The green-labeled passengers are all in the highest-paying cabins on the upper decks. The VIPs, the wealthy, the corporate partners. The red-labeled ones, crew members, economy passengers, staff from the lower decks. So the AI is funneling infected or expendable groups into quarantine sections. That's when the full horror dawns on me. This isn't just a glitch. The system is making decisions based on some corporate directive. It's separating the classes. I recall rumors that the company was collaborating with a biotech firm. Something about new pathogen responses. Could they be using this cruise as a test bed? Then, as if reading my thoughts from the overhead speaker in this control room, I hear a soft hiss of static. A voice emerges, male, unrecognizable. Captain Graves, I see you've discovered our protocol. This is an official statement from corporate. I freeze. The voice continues. Your duty is to maintain order. We are aware of the contamination. We expect you to cooperate and follow our instructions. Captain, you will comply, or else we'll ensure your son never receives a penny. We know your situation. Are you willing to sacrifice your livelihood, your future, for these people? The line cuts, and a wave of nausea hits. They brought Daniel into this. But if I bend now, I'll never forgive myself. Daniel might hate me, but he'd hate me more if I let these people die. While thinking through my options, I finally heard a familiar voice on the radio. Captain, it's Kayla. We have trouble on Deck 5 near the cabins. People are attacking each other. There's panic in her tone. They're not biting, they're whispering, non-stop. And if they catch you, Captain, we're losing them. My stomach churns. Stay put, I'm on my way. I grab a handheld radio, leaving the control room. I navigate sealed doors, forcibly overriding mechanical locks where I can. Twice, I have to detour because entire sections are quarantined behind reinforced barriers. When I finally reach Deck 5, the corridor stinks of rancid water, sweat, and something chemical. Kayla stands at the far end with 2 of her security staff. Bodies sprawl on the floor, about 4 crew members or what's left of them. I see no obvious wounds, just gray, cracking skin like dried coral. Kayla sees me. They came at us, whispering nonsense about the dumping ground, about cargo manifests, words that made no sense to me. Then they tried to drink from the cleaning supply closet. They tore open the big jug of water we use for mopping. I approach one of the fallen. The face is contorted in an expression of something similar to longing. I can't describe it. Then I realize the chest is still moving faintly. "He's alive," I murmur. As soon as I say it, the figure's eyes snap open. He, or it, sits up abruptly, body moving in a jerky, unnatural way. A rasping whisper escapes cracked lips. "We remember everything." Then he lunges for me, hands outstretched. I scramble back. Kayla draws her baton, whacking the infected man across the shoulder. He staggers but doesn't fall. Instead, he turns and grips her arm with surprising strength. Another security officer fires a taser, and the infected collapses, muscles spasming. My heart hammers. "Restrain him," I shout. "We have to get him to Adams." Kayla looks shaken. "He used to be Manny from housekeeping," she whispers. "He didn't deserve this." I swallow hard, nodding at the officer to secure Manny's arms. 2 others remain unmoving on the floor. I step closer to confirm they're not about to reanimate like Manny. Their eyes are open but dull, no sign of life. Is this the fate of everyone who drank the ship's water? We manage to drag Manny into the elevator, using a special override key to bypass the lockdown. I hate the system's eyes on us, but we can't do anything else. Kayla keeps Manny pinned in the corner, his body twitching. He keeps whispering broken phrases. "Cargo hold," "voices under the waves," they call, over and over. After arriving at the medical deck, we find the corridor jammed with anxious passengers who must have forced their way here, seeking help. They part as we pass, eyes filled with fear. This is what corporate was trying to hide. We reach the double doors of the medical bay. It was locked. Adams must have sealed himself inside. I pound on it. "Doc, open up. We've got a live one for you, Manny from housekeeping." A hiss, then the door slides open just enough for us to slip through. Adams stands there, sweaty and anxious. "Put him on that bed," he gestures to a separate room. "Careful. I've seen a few more in the last hour. They get extremely strong when they're in that delirious state." We wrestle Manny onto the bed. Adams quickly attaches restraints and a fresh IV line, though I question the point of more fluids if water is fueling the infection. Manny bucks once, whispering, "So thirsty," then collapses into a near catatonic state. What is happening to them? I demand, stepping away from Manny's bedside. Why do they whisper like that? Why do they want more water? Adams exhales shakily. "I tested one earlier who died. I think this pathogen changes the body's cellular structure, makes them crave water to propagate it. The victim's neurons are firing off random synapses, connecting with memories that aren't even theirs. It's as if the infection merges collective experiences. Doesn't that sound like the same phenomenon the survivor was describing? My skin crawls. They're sharing memories across bodies." Adams nods grimly. "That's my hypothesis. And with the entire ship's water supply compromised, we could be looking at hundreds, if not thousands of infected soon. I'm trying to find a cure, but the system is messing with me, Captain. I no longer have access to some medical supplies." Adams rubs his temples. "I'm not giving up yet. I'll keep working. Just keep bringing me samples and maybe some infected who aren't too far gone." I sense a wave of determination from him. "We'll do our best," I say, though the odds seem impossibly stacked. Over the next few hours, pockets of resistance form. We rig plastic sheets, tear open life vests for padding, and block the water fountains. Some crew members, not yet infected, gather passengers in safe corners of the ship. The dining halls are sealed, but the shops and VIP lounges remain open for the high rollers. The lockdown has physically separated us, with people like me being stuck in the lower decks with minimal resources. Between assisting with makeshift barricades, I slip away for my last desperate attempt to end the carnage. With the control room being locked, our only way out is to manually shut down the AI system through the ship's electrical room. Kayla volunteers to come with me, along with a few loyal staff. With batons and tasers in our hands, we start down a narrow service corridor leading toward the maintenance access. There's an ominous drip of water from the overhead pipes. By now, anything liquid sends a chill down my spine. Then, a loud crash echoes from a bend in the hallway. It's followed by a distorted, breathless whispering, several voices at once, overlapping, almost chanting. My pulse quickens. Kayla tightens her grip on her baton. As we round the corner, we see a small group of infected huddled around a bucket of filthy mop water. They're lapping at it, hunched like animals, the bones in their necks straining grotesquely. While their skin is the same grayish, coral-like texture we've seen before, they seem even less human than the other zombies, almost violent in their movements. One infected figure shudders and turns at the sound of our footsteps. My stomach clenches when I recognize the face. It was Celeste, my night officer. Her once alert eyes are clouded, rimmed by dark hollows. The crisp uniform she wore on the bridge is torn, her name tag barely clinging to the fabric. "Celeste," I rasp, voice catching in my throat. She tilts her head, as though she half remembers who I am. Then, in unison, the others set down the bucket of water and rise with unnatural jerks. The whispering grows louder, filling the corridor with hissed fragments of words. "We see you. We're calling you. Remember the voices." They stagger closer. Jonas, one of the security officers, lifts his taser, visibly trembling. Celeste's lips peel back in a silent snarl, and she lunges forward. Kayla reacts first, swinging her baton with a dull thud across Celeste's forearm. But the infected woman hardly flinches. Another infected, a tall man from the housekeeping crew, strikes at Jonas, knocking him to the ground. Jonas yelps in pain, the taser clattering away. "Hold the line," Kayla shouts, adrenaline surging in her voice. I step up, baton raised. My first strike hits Celeste across the shoulder, staggering her. She twists, trying to grab my arm with a grip that feels more like metal pincers than human fingers. I slam my knee into her side and force her back. I see Kayla rush over, baton connecting with the second infected skull. Blood spatters the bulkhead, dark and watery. The creature slumps but isn't fully down. It twitches, tries to rise again, whispering the waves, over and over. Kayla grits her teeth and swings again, a sickening crack echoing through the corridor. Meanwhile, Celeste fixes her glazed eyes on me. A rattling whisper emanates from her chest. "Captain, open the water lines. Set us free." The words are half drowned by the ragged rasp of her breathing. I refuse to believe that this is the officer who once shared jokes with me on the quiet night shifts, who looked up to me for mentorship. "Celeste," I plead, blocking a wild strike of her arm. "Please, you have to fight it." She cocks her head in a momentary pause as though she almost recognizes her name. But then the infection wins out. She lunges, shrieking in an eerie half-whisper, nails raking at my vest. Her strength is shocking. My baton barely keeps her at bay. Celeste then grabs for my throat. I twist sideways, slamming the baton into her midsection. She doubles over, gasping, but her eyes remain locked on mine, that relentless whisper continuing in some incomprehensible cadence. My chest aches with the cruelty of what I have to do. I bring the baton down again, this time aiming for her temple. There's a heavy crack, and she drops to her knees. Blood, thin and laced with watery fluid, seeps from the wound. For a split second, the corridor seems to go silent, as if even the ship's systems are holding their breath. "Captain," Celeste rasps one last time, voice barely a whisper, and then she collapses, her body going limp on the cold floor. A roar of anguished tears from my throat as I curse the ship, the infection, and everything that led us here. Kayla finishes off the final attacker, another housekeeping worker I recognize as Tamaz, by driving her baton squarely into his skull with a desperate force that sends him crashing into the mop bucket. She staggers backward, covered in spatters, tears welling in her eyes. 4 infected lay dead, twitching or unmoving. My mind reels. These weren't strangers, they were colleagues, friends. "We did what we had to," Kayla murmurs, though her voice cracks. "They would have killed us, or worse." I force a breath, tasting bile in my mouth. "Come on," I manage to say, voice rough. "We can't stay here, more could be coming." No one argues. We step over the remains, a grim parade of survivors in a corridor that feels like it belongs in a nightmare. "Celeste, I'm so sorry. I should have protected you," I whisper. With Kayla leading the way again, we finally reach the electrical room, a cramped chamber with panels of circuit breakers and monitors for power distribution. As Kayla taps a sequence, bypassing the standard access with a click, the server door on the camera feed pops open. We did it. Let's move and shut this thing down before the system relocks it. Racing back down, we find the door half open. Inside, banks of servers hum in the gloom. On a side table sits a thick binder labeled AI Overwatch Confidential. I snatch it up, flipping pages by the light of Kayla's flashlight. My eyes skim phrases: test population, behavioral analysis, water-based infection introduced, focus on lower deck exposure. My blood boils. Proof. Real, tangible proof that this was planned. But before we could react to our discovery, a metallic hiss echoes behind us. The door is sliding shut again. Kayla lunges to block it, but it slams, nearly crushing her fingers. "Damn it," she curses. Then a calm female voice from the PA says, "Unauthorized breach in server room. Security protocols engaged." The door locks with a clang. We're trapped in here, but at least we have the binder. With shaking hands, I read more. The infection is designated Project Hydra. The goal is to test a low-cost, high-yield biological agent to control populations in crisis scenarios. There's mention of a biotech firm that developed it. The infection is not a pure zombie virus. There's a neural assimilation component, presumably to gather collective intelligence. Kayla breathes heavily, glancing around. "We have to get this out to the authorities, Captain. But we have no comms beyond the ship." That's when a moment of clarity hit me. Dr. Adams said he needed resources to find a cure. Maybe if we expose the servers, kill the system from inside, we can free the labs and let him do real work. I scan the servers, searching for a kill switch. We rummage for a while longer until we realize there's no easy fix. The best we can do is gather evidence from the binder, maybe copy files onto a flash drive if we can. The terminals are password protected, but Kayla manages to pry open a side panel. She's got some skill from her security training. She tries to retrieve data from the system's local memory. The screens fill with code, a flurry of text. A progress bar indicates it's copying data. At least we have something to show the world if we survive. While desperately searching for a way out of the locked control room, we're saved by the sound of tearing metal. Suddenly, the door squeals, parting slightly, revealing a crowbar tip. On the other side, we see a few determined faces, some crew who must have realized we were trapped. We slip out, breathless, with the binder and flash drive in hand. We push through to the medical bay, binder clutched tightly. I want Adams to see it to confirm or deny any leads. If there's a cure, surely the best doctor I know can find it. To our surprise, the door to the medical bay is open. The place is deserted except for a few infected patients strapped to beds. They moan softly. I call out, "Adams, Doc, are you here?" But there was no answer. We move deeper into the facility, passing the abandoned nurses' station. I step into the main lab area, and that's when I see him. Adams was quietly packing a bag with vials, writing something on a clipboard. Relief rushes me. "Doc, thank God, we found evidence. This was no accident." Adams whirls around, his eyes oddly calm, a slow exhale. "Oh, Captain, you are here." His tone is off, almost disinterested. I hold up the binder. "They planned this. The water, it's a test. We have to get everyone out." Adams meets my gaze. "I know," he says simply. "What do you mean, you know?" He sets the clipboard down, stepping away from the counter. "I've known for months. My presence here was no coincidence." Kayla moves to my side, baton half raised. "You're lying," he sighs, face weary. "I wish I were, but this is bigger than you realize. You see, my family's safety depends on my cooperation. The company made it very clear, develop or facilitate the test, and my loved ones remain protected." He gestures to the half-dozen infected strapped to beds. "Don't you see how quickly it's evolving? This is a huge scientific leap." I almost lunge at him. "Scientific leap? You're murdering people." He raises his hands. "My role was strictly observation. I was told measures would be in place to ensure the infection was contained among volunteers. But well, let's just say corporate found a more cost-effective approach." He closes his eyes as though pained. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I was gathering data, not searching for a cure. The company wants to see how it spreads, how it can be manipulated or harnessed. My job was to gather that data in real time, nothing more." Adams sets his jaw, then does something chilling. He steps aside, and a group of infected shuffle into view from an adjoining corridor. They look disoriented, but none of them attack him. Instead, they step around him like he's invisible. They do, however, turn their milky eyes on Kayla and myself. Adams then lifts his hands in a gesture that almost resembles a maestro conducting an orchestra. The infected remain still, but the threat is implicit. "I wasn't sure if you'd make it this far," Adams continues. "I was prepared to jettison if things got out of control. Now that the rescue is on its way, I just need to finalize my data. Then I will leave." Kayla frowns. "Rescue? We're under lockdown. There is no rescue." Adams gives a small, pitying smile. "Not for you. For VIPs, corporate executives, and essential personnel, like myself. They're sending a helicopter from a private paramilitary group, so the test remains undisclosed." He tilts his head. "I do feel sorry for you, but I have a job to finish. I can barely form words over my rage. You helped them do this to us, to Manny, to half the crew. You let them die." "They were going to die anyway," Adams mutters, though a flicker of guilt crosses his face. "At least this way, their suffering contributed to scientific progress." Something inside me snaps. But before I can respond, the alarm blares again, red lights flashing. A new message. "Lockdown Stage 2. Hostile entities identified. All non-essential personnel remain in place. Evacuation protocol for authorized individuals in T-2 hours." Adams lifts his phone, glancing at a text. "They're ahead of schedule. I have to go." He nods to the infected. "Don't worry, these ones won't kill you. Not if you don't provoke them. The infection needs living hosts." With a final calm look, he steps out of the lab, leaving Kayla and me with half a dozen zombies. I feel Kayla's trembling at my side. "We can't fight all of them," she murmurs. I steel myself. "Go," I hiss to Kayla. We bolt away. The infected swarm after us, arms outstretched. We swerve around an exam table and push through a secondary door leading to the corridor. Kayla slams it behind us. We stand there, chest heaving, uncertain. For now, we've escaped. But Adams is gone, off to join his rescue. By the time we returned to the few uninfected, word had spread that a rescue ship is coming. I see renewed hope in the eyes of crew members as Kayla and I gather them in the main atrium. "We have to get to the top deck," someone says. "They'll see us, they'll help us." But I suspected that the truth was far darker. Then we hear it. The sound of approaching helicopter blades. Kayla meets my gaze. "They're here." She grips the baton at her side. A group of about 20 survivors join us, armed with broom handles, wrenches, anything. We push our way up the staircases, avoiding quarantined zones whenever possible. Infected wander the halls, some too far gone to notice us, others lunging half-heartedly. We fend them off with tasers or rush past. Finally, we emerge onto the top deck. The ocean around us is calm, which only makes the scene more surreal. Overhead, a black helicopter hovers, the chop-chop-chop of its blades drowning out everything else. Alongside the Celestial Voyager, a smaller paramilitary vessel has pulled up, not a Coast Guard or Navy ship. Its crew wears black uniforms, sidearms at the ready. On the helipad, I spot Adams, flanked by 3 men in tactical gear. He looks annoyingly calm, clutching a metal briefcase, undoubtedly the data. Behind him, a handful of VIPs. Wealthy passengers, corporate reps, all stepping into the helicopter's harness. Security staff with advanced gear guide them. One soldier sees us and lifts a tablet. I catch a glimpse of the screen. It was the curated list of passengers with clearance. The passengers who deserve to live. Kayla grips my shoulder. "We're not on that list," she mutters. The soldier's voice booms through a handheld loudspeaker. "Unauthorized survivors remain where you are. This extraction is for authorized personnel only." Another soldier waves a rifle, silently warning us off. Not long after that, a VIP boards the helicopter, followed by another. In moments, the rotor pitch intensifies. They're about to take off. One of the paramilitary soldiers shouts into a headset, "Proceed with final containment. This vessel is no longer viable." He glances at us, the group of exhausted, shell-shocked survivors. "You are to remain on board. Do not approach the helicopter." "What about us?" Someone cries. "You can't leave us here." The soldier sets his jaw. "This operation does not authorize your rescue. You are contaminated." Then, in a quieter voice, I hear him say to a colleague, "The disposal coordinates are locked in. Let's move." My throat constricts as I realize that the ship is being steered, by autopilot or by remote control, further out to sea. They'll sink us or otherwise destroy every trace. Project Hydra never happened. The helicopter recedes into the distance, leaving only the roar of the ocean and that mechanical voice echoing overhead. All unauthorized survivors remain in place. Disposal in T-8 hours. In that moment, I feel everything inside me shift. We might be doomed, but I'll be damned if I give up without a fight. My mind drifts to Daniel. "Son, if you can hear me." I tried. I turned to the battered men and women behind me, what's left of my crew, and a few passengers who refused to cower in locked cabins. "All right," I say, lifting my voice above the wind. "We've got 8 hours, maybe less, before they sink this ship. Let's use every minute." I raise the binder that Kayla and I had salvaged. We have proof of what they did. If we find a way to broadcast this, maybe, just maybe, someone out there will listen. If not, we'll make sure they never forget us. Now, who's with me? A murmur of agreement rolls through the small crowd, faint yet resolute. Suddenly, a violent shudder runs through the ship as the autopilot changes course. Overhead, a solitary gull cries out as if in mourning. And somewhere in the distance, the helicopter carrying Adams and all the VIPs vanishes like a passing dream, leaving us with one certainty. There will be no safe harbor for the Celestial Voyager. We are alone, we are disposable, and the ocean is vast, indifferent, and ready to swallow us whole. That's the end of this story. If you enjoyed the video, subscribing to my channel would help me out more than you can imagine. I appreciate you, and I'll see you soon.